Ready for a deep dive into the art world. Today we're tackling the Charging Chasseur, a painting that just explodes with energy.
And you know it's got to be good, right? I mean, it's hanging in the Louvre, the Charging Chasseur, or as it's sometimes called, an officer of the Imperial Horse Guards charging.
Exactly. So we're dealing with a certified masterpiece here. The piece was created around 1812 by French artist Théodore Géricault. What's the story it's trying to tell?
Well, imagine this, a Napoleonic cavalry officer on horseback. But he's not just riding along, he's about to charge right into battle. Géricault captures this incredible sense of action and movement. It's like you're right there in the heat of the moment.
Wow, that's pretty intense. I read that this was actually the first painting that Géricault ever showed publicly. Talk about making an entrance.
Right. It was a pretty bold move for a debut, especially considering the artistic climate at the time. We're talking about the early 1800s, when neoclassicism was all the rage. Think about those paintings with their clean lines and that sense of perfect order and control, like they're frozen in time. Géricault was leaning towards a different style completely. He was drawn to Romanticism.
So how did he break away from those neoclassical norms?
Well, look at the Charging Chasseur, and you'll see it immediately. The diagonal composition, the energy in the brushstrokes, the raw emotion of the scene, it's like a whirlwind of movement compared to the calm, static poses of neoclassicism.
I see what you mean. That diagonal composition really makes it feel like the horse and rider are bursting out of the canvas. I love how this deep dive is already changing the way I look at art. But it sounds like even while Géricault was breaking new ground, he still drew inspiration from some of the greats who came before him.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting. You see, that powerful rearing horse. That pose wasn't entirely Géricault's invention. He actually borrowed it from another masterpiece, Peter Paul Rubens' painting St. George, which was painted more than 200 years earlier.
Wow, talk about a shout-out. So how did Géricault take Rubens' influence and make it his own?
Well, Rubens shows St. George battling a dragon from a side view. Géricault, on the other hand, positions his horse and rider facing forward, staring directly out at you, the viewer. It's a subtle shift, but it completely changes the feel of the painting.
It's like you're not just watching the action unfold, you're part of the scene.
Exactly.
Right.
And this bold move in the Charging Chasseur gives us a glimpse of the artistic path Géricault would continue to forge throughout his career. He was fascinated by raw emotion, by human struggle, by capturing these powerful moments in time. This fascination ultimately culminated in his most famous work, The Raft of the Medusa.
The Raft of the Medusa. Now that's a name that sends shivers down your spine. What is it about this painting that really cemented Géricault's legacy, would you say?
Oh, The Raft of the Medusa. It's a masterpiece of Romanticism, no doubt. Imagine this. A shipwrecked crew clinging to this makeshift raft. Their bodies are battered, their hope is dwindling, and Géricault captures it all with this raw, visceral intensity.
It's interesting though, right? Because it's such a different subject than the Charging Chasseurs. One is full of action, while the other one feels much more like a struggle for survival.
You're right, they're very different subjects. But you hit on something key there, that feeling, right? See, even though the subject matter is different, Géricault's artistic vision shines through. That same emotional intensity, that desire to confront the viewer with the power of human experience, it's all there.
It's like he's saying, look, this is what it means to be human, the highs and lows, the triumphs and the tragedies.
Exactly. But, and here's where our deep dive takes us in a fascinating direction. Let's fast forward a couple of centuries to the year 2007. This is where American artist Kehinde Wiley steps onto the scene.
Ugh, Kehinde Wiley. I'm familiar with his work. He's the one who did those incredible portraits, right? Reimagining classical paintings with contemporary figures.
You got it. Well, in 2007, Wiley turned his attention to the Charging Chasseur, creating his own interpretation titled Officer of the Hussars. And this is where things get really interesting, the way he takes this centuries-old masterpiece and injects it with a whole new layer of meaning.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about Wiley's take on it. What did he change? What did he keep the same?
Okay, so picture this. You still have that powerful rearing horse almost bursting out of the canvas, a direct nod to Géricault's original composition. But here's the twist. Instead of a Napoleonic officer, Wiley places a young black man in the saddle.
Wow, now that is a statement. It makes you think about who gets to be the hero, whose story gets told.
Exactly. It's such a powerful commentary on representation in art. For centuries, we've seen a certain type of figure in those heroic roles, and Wiley challenges those assumptions head on.
It's like he's asking us to confront our own biases, isn't it?
Absolutely. And he takes it a step further. To really drive home the contrast, he dresses his writer in contemporary clothing. We're talking a sleeveless shirt, jeans, Timberland boots, the whole 9 yards.
It's such a brilliant juxtaposition. You
Yeah.
got the grandeur of this historical painting, but then these little details pull you right into the present day. It really makes you think, you know, about how we see ourselves, how we see each other, and who gets to be represented in these grand, heroic narratives.
That's the beauty of art, isn't it? How it can make us question those assumptions, challenge those deeply ingrained ideas that we might not even realize we have.
It's like Wiley reached back in time, grabbed Jericho by the shoulder, and said, hey, we need to talk about this.
Huh. Yeah, I love that image. And by grounding the image in the present with those contemporary details, those clothes, the attitude, it just creates this bridge between history and the present day. It's a powerful reminder that these conversations about representation, about who we see as heroes, are far from over.
It's almost like Wiley's saying, this is just as important now as it was back then.
Exactly. And who knows what Géricault would have thought about this modern interpretation? It's a fascinating question to ponder.
It really is. It makes you think about the legacy of a work of art, how it can continue to evolve and spark new conversations, even centuries later. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. And at the end of the day, the Charging Chasseur is so much more than just a painting of a soldier on horseback.
Oh, absolutely. It's a springboard for discussions about artistic evolution, about influence and inspiration, and yeah, like we've been saying, about whose stories get told and how.
Yeah.
Well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. It's like you always say, the next time you're looking at a work of art, don't just see what's on the surface.
Right. Dig a little deeper. Ask those tough questions. Who's missing from this picture? What stories aren't being told?
Because art has this amazing power to make us see the world differently, to challenge our perspectives, and to start these really important conversations that we might not have otherwise had. And on that note, that wraps up another deep dive. Until next time, keep those artistic conversations going.